First of all, Mr. Vice President, Commissioner Hahn, Governor Walsh, and Congressman Hagedorn, thanks again for being here. We take this very seriously. We're driven to lead, and we have an opportunity here to lead and show essential leadership. It's Mayo's DNA to be able to tackle patients with complex and serious disease, and this is a perfect example of what this is. Gather around the table. I'm going to briefly introduce the 4 people. After that, I'll just say a couple more words, and I'm going to hand it over back. So I'll start off with Dr. Amy Williams, and Dr. Amy Williams is our Executive Dean for the practice. So she oversees all the practice, all Mayo sites across the world. Haley, good to see you here. Haley's one of our ICU nurses, has a frontline job, has been looking after our patients with COVID-19. She's also a born leader, and it's really nice that you could come here. Thank you. Dr. Maurice is head of our Mayo Clinic Laboratories. He's the president of the Mayo Clinic Laboratories. He's a hematologist, and he also oversees the Department of Laboratory Medicine and Pathology. Dr. Andrew Badley is chair of molecular medicine. He's a virologist, and he has a critical role in that he heads our COVID-19 research task force. So Mayo Clinic has organized COVID-19 in 4 main sectors. This first is this task force, and this task force has an essential role. It was started up really early and is there to make sure that every patient that Mayo Clinic sees has access to the best clinical trial possible for that patient. The second critical role is to make sure that only research that has the highest promise gets done, so that we're not doing too many protocols, but we're rather focusing on the ones like convalescent plasma that have the best chance of success, including the antiviral. The second is molecular and serology testing. You've already heard about that, and that's what Dr. Maurice is here for. We have the opportunity to truly scale at a national level. The third is to contribute to the fact that as we go through this and no longer talk about one surge, but about peaks and valleys, how do you identify places that you need to get to really quickly? We've been working with a variety of companies, with MIT Media Lab, but also a company called Inference that allows us, using AI, social media, to identify places that aren't yet a hotspot but may become one. Martin County in Minnesota is a perfect example. We saw an early signal a few weeks ago. We sent in much more testing, sent out more resources, and that never became a hotspot. And then lastly, it's what we truly do best, which is the practice. Mayo Clinic is built for patients who need us, patients with complex and serious disease, and Dr. Williams is here. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, and once again, we're truly grateful that we have this opportunity to serve our nation. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Farrugia. I want to thank you and the 39,000 men and women of Mayo Clinic, first and foremost, for the extraordinary work of healers that you do every day, year-round. It's an inspiration to be here today, and I thank you for the hospitality, and I thank you for your leadership. The last time we were together was in the West Wing of the White House, early on in the work of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, and we appreciate your full engagement at the federal level and the leadership that you've provided from here in Minnesota. I also want to say how much we appreciate Governor Tim Walz and the partnership that you've forged, not just with our task force, but with our president and with every element of the federal response. Governor, we see the great progress here in Minnesota. We certainly grieve the loss of more than 300 Minnesotans. Those families are in our prayers and have our deepest sympathies. And our hearts are also with those who are continuing to struggle with the coronavirus. But Governor, the fact that you've made the progress that you've made, that the impacts here in Minnesota have been at the level that they've been is a testament, I know you would say, first to the people of Minnesota, to the fact that they have embraced the guidelines that you've issued, that we've issued at the federal level, and so they have our congratulations and our thanks. But I also want to thank you on behalf of President Trump and our entire team at the White House Coronavirus Task Force for the partnership that we forged. I also want to thank Congressman Jim Hagedorn who is a friend and is a leader on Capitol Hill. Jim has played an instrumental role in ensuring that Congress now on 4 different occasions came together in a bipartisan way to provide resources for families, resources for hospitals, for states, and Congressman, we just thank you. Thank you for your leadership and making sure people understand the unique benefits that Mayo Clinic in particular brings to the life of the nation. And to Haley and to the extraordinary medical professionals around the table, thank you for your work here. I'm pleased to be joined by one of your own. Dr. Stephen Hahn is the head of the FDA, and when we were in the laboratories, we heard about the flexibility that Dr. Hahn has been extending at the President's direction to places just like Mayo Clinic, and the innovation and the development of treatments here using that flexibility has been truly inspiring. And so I know you'll hear from Dr. Hahn in a moment, but we're just all very grateful. We're all very grateful for his leadership and really the partnership with the extraordinary scientists here at Mayo Clinic. It's inspiring for me to be back in Minnesota. A few days after the President tapped me to lead the White House Coronavirus Task Force, Governor, I was here with you. We visited 3M, and in partnership with 3M, I'm pleased to say that we've been able to make tens of millions of N95 masks available. In fact, it was here in Minnesota at 3M that we learned in that discussion that there was a need for Congress to extend liability protection to industrial N95 masks. And we worked on a bipartisan basis with the Congress. We were able to secure that approval, and now tens of millions of N95 masks have been distributed around the country. And Governor, that all started here. And I want to thank you, and I also want to thank the team at 3M for the job they're doing, meeting at this moment with resources not only from here in Minnesota, other facilities in the country, but literally around the world. But I had to be here at Mayo today because when the President and I heard about the Moonshot Partnership, we knew that this was the right state and the right time to come and celebrate what the President likes to call a whole of America approach. When he tapped me to lead the White House Coronavirus Task Force, he said, I want a whole of government approach. That's government at every level, federal and state. We've spared no expense. We've flowed resources and expertise to every level to confront this coronavirus epidemic. But it was very clear to me early on that what President Trump really meant was a whole of America approach. And working with you, Dr. Farrugia, and places like Mayo Clinic, we've managed to stand up an extraordinary amount of progress in testing across this country. And I want to commend you for the innovation reflected here at Mayo Clinic, and I know the Governor is as grateful as President and I are for the efforts that you all have taken. It's remarkable to think that just 2 months ago we had done roughly 8,500 coronavirus tests in America. But because of the innovation that President Trump secured by bringing commercial labs together, including the great Mayo Clinic commercial lab not far from here, I was told on Air Force 2 this morning we've conducted 5.6 million coronavirus tests. But when I hear about the innovation that's been developed here and the opportunity to scale some of the new tests that you've developed here at the Mayo Clinic, I know that we've only just begun to expand new platforms of testing around the country, and it'll be owing to the ingenuity, the creativity, and the expertise of the extraordinary men and women here at Mayo Clinic and in other places just like it around America. So I want to say thank you for that. And let me also say I had the opportunity to meet Dennis today in the chair as he was donating blood to the Mayo Clinic's blood plasma expanded access program. And I actually was told that at this point you've infused more than 3,000 people with blood plasma from people that have recovered from the coronavirus, but literally more than 6,000 Americans and at 2,100 sites around the country are participating in this. And we want to thank particularly Mayo Clinic for leading on this. I know it was On April 3rd, that the FDA announced that the Mayo Clinic would serve as the lead institution for the blood plasma access program, where we're collecting blood plasma from Americans who've recovered. But no surprise to anyone that knows the Mayo Clinic, you didn't wait to be asked. Even before the FDA's announcement, you were already part of the blood plasma initiative of physicians and investigators harnessing the power of 40 different institutions around America. I also want to thank the American Red Cross and blood banks across the country that are working with doctors to collect and distribute this plasma. We want to encourage every American looking on that if you have recovered from the coronavirus for the time indicated for this trial, which is either the 14 days or the 28 days, we want to encourage you to consider donating your blood. The doctors all told me that we are early in this process, so we want to draw no conclusions, but we are encouraged with the news that though we don't know for sure about the impact of this treatment, we are told, some doctors tell us that they're actually seeing people on respirators getting better more quickly when they're injected with the blood plasma of people who've recovered from coronavirus. And so for any American looking on, this is one more way you can be there for your neighbors. If you've recovered from the coronavirus, you can donate blood at one of more than 2,000 sites around the country. Contact your Red Cross, call your doctor, and be a part of the healing of America that's taking place from here at Mayo and all across this country. We have more than 100,000 Americans who've already fully recovered from the coronavirus, and so there's great opportunities for more Americans to participate in this groundbreaking study. And finally, as we spoke about yesterday in the Rose Garden, testing continues to be a priority and focus of our administration, of the President's, and of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. And I wanted to be here today because, Governor Walz, as you and I have talked on many occasions, it's been your collaboration with the Mayo Clinic, with the University of Minnesota, that has really opened doors of opportunity for testing not only here in Minnesota, but also creating new testing platforms that can be applied around the country, literally by the hundreds and thousands and even millions of tests in the months ahead. Taking advantage of the FDA regulatory flexibility that we extended to you, Dr. Farrugia, I was so impressed to learn of the molecular test that you've developed a month ago that is providing results within 24 hours. And 2 weeks ago, you began to offer an antibody test, I'm told, as a part of the governor's Moonshot Partnership. And it's remarkable to think that in 45 different states, Mayo Clinic has already affected 150,000 of those tests, including thousands here in Minnesota. And I know that working with the governor and working with his team, which has already stood up, Governor, I think more than 120 testing sites around the state, you're going to be taking these new resources, making them available, and beginning to test at a level here in Minnesota that has been publicly reported as much as 20,000 tests a day. This is a testament to the innovation here at Mayo Clinic. It's a testament, Governor, to your leadership, but it really is also a testament to the whole of America response to this moment. And Dr. Farrugia, I want to commend you for your role in this. I want to thank the governor for his role, and I'm anxious to learn more from your team here. But I hope, as I close, that the American people share our admiration for what's happened here in Minnesota, here at Mayo Clinic, with the University of Minnesota, and with your state leadership. But also I hope it gives people confidence. I know, Governor, that you're already beginning to move in the direction of opening up Minnesota again. And you know it was about 10 days ago the President opened up our guidelines for restarting the American economy in a safe and responsible way. And I would just say to every American looking on that the best way to hasten the day that we can reopen Minnesota and reopen America is to continue to heed the guidance that you've received from state and local authorities as we continue to practice social distancing, and we'll continue to scale the kind of testing and resources that we need to meet this moment. But I can assure you that the President of the United States, his Vice President, your Governor, and I know every citizen of Minnesota looks for the day that we can get America working again. We all know that America works when America's working, and the progress and the innovation you've developed here, Dr. Farouj, is going to make it that much more possible to reopen Minnesota and to reopen America. So I want to thank you. I want to thank the 39,000 incredible men and women, healers all, here at Mayo Clinic, and tell you that I will leave here today inspired and encouraged that we're one step closer to reopening our country and healing our land because of the work you're doing here. So thank you all, and God bless you. Governor?
Well, Mr. Vice President, thank you. Welcome to Minnesota, and welcome to Rochester. I can tell you that the Vice President spends countless hours on the phone with governors every week. He's there to pick up the phone when we call. I want to thank you and the President. I think there's a bond with the governors because of a former governor when you sit in the seat and the responsibility that comes with it. So I can tell you, you coming back to Minnesota, coming out to listen about what we're doing and to see what I think is the path forward. And I'm very grateful for your words. We continue to social distance. We stand up the research around testing, around tracing, around isolating. We make sure that we're aligning the resources we have in a really smart way and use those resources we have. And in Minnesota, I understand very clearly, pretty much everywhere I go, this would be one of those places. I stand on the shoulders of giants. What's really great at Mayo Clinic is those giants are at the table with us today in many cases. I look for a world after COVID-19 when baseball cards aren't the hottest, but researcher cards are, and everybody wants one, because that's who we're looking for. You walk through those labs, and the Vice President saw it. You can't help but be inspired. You can't help but see what ingenuity can do, and I am grateful for that. Dr. Farouj, your willingness to step up and help make these partnerships work, they're not easy. One of the genius things we do in our country is we have opportunities to create on our own, and in many cases we're somewhat stratified. You had to bring a whole lot of healthcare systems together that provide care across this state in many different ways. CentraCare cares for hundreds of thousands in rural Minnesota. Hospitals in many cases that are very small and have profit margins that are very small, but understand they're part of this too. They came in as part of this. And then, of course, the land-grant university at the University of Minnesota. They were created to serve Minnesotans. I think sometimes we forget our land-grant universities, what their main purpose was, not just to beat Indiana in football, but to create things. You know I can never pass those up as the football coach. Those land-grant universities were part of what we could do, and they brought that together. So I want to thank them. I want to thank Minnesota Department of Health. Generations of Minnesotans had invested in the things that made a difference. From folks like Dr. Ostrom at the University of Minnesota and working to Jan Malcolm now, there's a tradition of folks that use the science and build partnerships. And then to our federal partners, Congressman Hagedorn, thank you. We're on calls where we are taken from different perspectives and asked of what's happening, asked what they can do at the federal level, and then asking us, have you done this? Congressman Hagedorn's work with the JBS plant and the protein supply sources is critical, of talking to us early, saying this is what needs to happen. That leadership and collaboration together is helping protect not only the workers and the health, but the workers' livelihoods and the ability to make sure that Minnesota, we feed the world. We literally feed the world, and disruptions in that cause immense problems. So I just want to say how grateful I am, Mr. Vice President, that you would come and take a look at this. You're right. We're stepping up the testing. I would tell the folks listening now, you can get online. There's a website there that will take you through potential symptoms that you have. If you think, and that testing online tells you think you should get a COVID-19 test, you can also go on, look where they're available, look on the timing, and you can get there and the directions to get that done. Mm-hmm. And our goal, again, is to make sure every symptomatic person is tested and that we have sentinel testing out there at a larger scale, because as the Vice President said, those are the steps that will be necessary to get people back doing what they want to do. They want to work, they want to get back out again, and they want to start doing the things that make life great. So, Mr. Vice President, I thank you for that, and I know you're here to hear the experts, but I think I speak on behalf of Minnesotans that when we take a whole government approach, when we take a whole country approach, when we align our resources really smartly, I think there is a sense of optimism. So thank you for coming to do that.
Well, thank you, Governor, very much.
Congressman,
Good.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you for traveling to southern Minnesota and being with us today. And thanks to you and President Trump for all the work that you're performing on behalf of the American people. I know you're working very hard, and you put a fine team around you, and we pray for your continued success. And Governor, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate your leadership, and you both have my continued commitment any way possible in order to help make sure we can get through this as best as possible. We're very proud of the people in southern Minnesota, just as you are, of all Americans, the way that they've made sacrifices on behalf of not just themselves, but their friends, their family, their neighbors, and total strangers. And there's really no way to highlight that more than what happens here at the Mayo Clinic. Very proud of this clinic, all the work that they do, the innovation. They're self-starters, and you saw today some of the incredible technical work and research that they've done to help the American people. I can attest personally that they give great care, and the doctors, nurses, and technicians here are world-class people. One other thing, some of my friends, including we met Dr. Joyner today and Dr. Scott Wright, they wanted me to pass along to you and Dr. Hahn how much they appreciate the way that you knocked down all those barriers, that you had the fast-track authority there for them, and they could make this happen. It was quite a team effort between both your group and, of course, the people here at Mayo. So with that, thank you for being here, sir.
Thanks, Congressman. Good to be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Persia. Mr. Vice President, it has been an absolute honor to serve with you in the White House Task Force. Thank you for your leadership. Governor Waltz, really congratulations on the job you've done in Minnesota. It's been a terrific partnership with the federal government, but also with the FDA. And Congressman, your leadership and support in Congress has meant the world to us and the federal government and FDA, so thank you very much. I just wanted to start on behalf of the 18,000 scientists, doctors, nurses at the FDA to extend our incredible heartfelt thanks to the frontline healthcare workers here at the Mayo Clinic and around the country. We know that you are the true heroes in this and really very much appreciate everything that you're doing. And our thanks to the Mayo Clinic. It's almost an unprecedented partnership that we have. President Trump has asked the FDA to reduce obstacles and red tape to allow the great American innovators to bring medical products to the American people. And that is illustrated no better than here at the Mayo Clinic. You truly bring science and medicine together, and you are just terrific innovators with the serology testing, with the molecular testing that you brought on so quickly and helped us to scale up around the country. And then with convalescent plasma. And I just want to emphasize what the Vice President has just mentioned about convalescent plasma. Our preliminary data suggests that there might be benefit here. We must wait for the clinical trials to tell us the answer to the question about its benefit. But in the meantime, Americans can give back, as they have done throughout this epidemic, by donating plasma. Just a few facts about that, and the leadership of the Mayo Clinic has been tremendous, and they're the leaders of this expanded access program. Over 2,000 sites have registered. Over 6,000 patients are now registered as part of this protocol. And we heard today that the 3,000th patient is going to be treated with convalescent plasma, potentially life-saving therapy. We're now at 1,000 collections per day. That's terrific news, and we're going to, of course, want to scale that up further. So my many thanks to the Mayo Clinic and Mr. Vice President for your leadership and leadership of the President.
Thanks.
Thank you. And with that, I'll hand it to our Executive Dean for the practice, Dr. Williams.
Thank you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to just tell you a little bit about the practice. I want to start by the beginning of our journey with robust modeling to determine what we needed to do to quickly, within days, transform our practice to care for COVID-positive patients and a surge that we thought was coming. And then when we realized with our modeling that we were going to be with this virus for quite a while, we had to again transform our practice to create a safe space for both COVID-19 patients and those that don't have COVID-19, because a lot of individuals need their care. And we were able to do that very quickly. In addition to that, we were able to set up wonderful clinical trials, and we have had great success in treating COVID-19 because the majority of patients that come into our hospitals or even don't make it into the hospital but are out in the outpatient setting are enrolled in clinical trials. We have significantly decreased the mortality in our ICUs. Mm-hmm. Everything that we have learned, from expanding our virtual care to reach the patients that can't travel here, to monitor people at home who have COVID-19, to immediately understand early on when they start to have symptoms, to give them earlier treatment. All of that has been very important and will actually help us as we move out of COVID-19 and into a new world where we do things even better than we do now. I want to thank you all for your help in being able to cross state lines with our virtual care. And in fact, we were able to help a hospital in New York doing virtual ICU to cover their ICUs with our experts here. That's what it's all about. We are absolutely here to share all of our knowledge, all of our expertise, all of our learnings from this experience, because together we can all fight this pandemic, and the next one will be ready.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Williams. Great report. This is an extraordinary institution, and the healing beyond coronavirus goes on every day. And the way you've responded here, never missed a beat. And I also want to commend you, Dr. Farrugia, about we did open up the rules and regulations about practicing across state lines, and Mayo Clinic was part of that surge of medical professionals being able to render assistance in New York through telehealth and in person, and we're grateful for that. We truly are, and I know the people of New York are grateful, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. It's a nice statistic that every day currently we do more telehealth visits than we did all year in 2019. So every day we do more than we did in 2019 because of what's going on.
I expect you think that telehealth has now scaled up in response to the coronavirus, but it will likely continue to be a great benefit to the American people. We're looking right now at how we make permanent some of those changes in telehealth.
We can reach more individuals than we were ever able to reach before. We can keep them safe at home.
Right.
It will also help our efficiency once people do come into our medical centers, because we can do some pre-visit work that we haven't been able to do as robustly in the past. So it is something that we'll take into the future with us for sure.
Yeah, I know that Dr. Hahn and I have talked about it, and the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services is looking at taking what are waivers that have allowed telehealth and now looking at how we can make that more part of modern American medicine in ways that, and with the coronavirus, it allowed people to consult their doctor without coming into an emergency room, without coming into the doctor's office and potentially exposing other Americans or family members. So great innovation, and that's a remarkable statistic.
Yeah, it is. Just in the interest of time, I'll move on to Dr. Badley, who's going to talk to us from the Healthcare Task Force.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. So, with our decades-long history of research in every discipline, we feel that Mayo was ideally suited to respond to the COVID outbreak. And when we compare how we are today compared to the onset of HIV, science is at a position now whereby we can move forward and get treatments and understanding so much more quickly, and that's because of your administration and other administrations' ongoing funding of basic science. So thank you for that. 7 weeks ago, Drs. Gores and Farrugia asked us to establish the COVID-19 Research Task Force, and we did so. And we put together 16 parallel work streams that cover the breadth of research, including biobanking, genomics, immunology, and everything else. Together, we've put together with our pharma partners 9 clinical trials on COVID-related therapies. We've activated them in days rather than weeks to months. And these trials cover the spectrum of disease from outpatient through intensive care units. Fortunately, we've not been overwhelmed with the numbers of patients that we've seen in New York City, and that combination of not being overwhelmed plus our access to trials have resulted in very good outcomes. So within the Rochester system, we've had 500 cases with 5 deaths for a 1% death rate. We've had 60 patients hospitalized with 2 deaths, and 70% of patients in total have been on some kind of experimental therapy, including plasma and others. And as of the past several weeks, we're at 90+% of patients are on a clinical trial. And we believe these are making a difference for all of our patients.
Wow.
So from the research standpoint, we thank you for and request continued funding into the future for discovery science and public health programs, accommodations for those researchers whose programs have been interrupted now, and then we wish to continue to offer Mayo involvement in national treatment guidelines and initiatives as we plan to move forward.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. That's really remarkable. 90% of your coronavirus cases in Rochester or in Minnesota as a whole?
In Rochester.
In Rochester are receiving on some kind of therapeutic.
Actually, not in Rochester. In our Mayo system, it's Florida, Arizona, Rochester, especially in Rochester.
Oh, that's remarkable. And I know they don't want me to get ahead of things, but are you encouraged by any of the early results in some of the therapeutics? This is an area we talk a lot about vaccines, but I want to assure people we're just as focused on encouraging the development of therapeutics.
I think there are
relief to people.
I think there are 3 or 4 drugs that we're testing that are showing signals of activity. And as we heard earlier, it's premature to make conclusions until the trials are done. But we believe they're making a difference. Vaccines hopefully will be started within several months. They'll take a year or more to get efficacy activity, but I think there's great cause for optimism. And again, it's because there's been such sustained funding for decades that allow us to understand science. We can, within weeks, understand the virus, the genetics of the virus, the host immune response of the virus, and compared to 30 years ago with HIV, that was not possible.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Badley, thank you for that. And we'll keep the support coming. But any kind of a timetable on when the therapeutics that you're developing, if they continue to show results? Because I know a vaccine is a year off. All the task force doctors have told me that from go, based on 3 different clinical trials. But therapeutics, we continue to hear, may be available this summer. Is that a possibility in any that you're working on?
I think we will see results from phase 2, which are early stage studies, over the course of the summer, which will show promise. To show efficacy to lead to FDA approval are going to require much larger studies that will begin to accrue midsummer to late summer. And with the rate of enrollment, I think it's possible we could have approved drugs within single-digit number of months.
Within when?
Single-digit number of months.
Yeah. And Dr. Hahn, do you want to speak at all about the development of therapeutics?
Yes, as you probably know, there's 70-plus clinical trials around the country, and we've issued a number of INDs for experimental and off-the-shelf drugs, just as Dr. Badley said, and we're, of course, very hopeful about the promise of those drugs. We're expecting in some of the trials a readout as early as late May, early June for some of the trials. And you're right, we have to wait for those data to help us make the determination of the gold standard of safety and efficacy. But we're very encouraged by the incredible response we've seen, academic centers, hospitals around the country. And so, our first step here is to look at the therapies directed against the virus, and then we can move to the antibody therapies and the vaccines as a sort of bridge before we get to the vaccine. So I agree with your timetable. I can assure you that FDA will be looking at the data as soon as they're available and making decisions, as you say, within hours and days, not weeks and months.
Right. They've been working around the clock. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Badley.
Thank you. Hailey, why don't we get to you, and then we'll end with Dr. Maurice, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about your experience in the front line.
I work on a designated COVID-positive unit at St. Mary's Hospital, so we only care for positive patients. So I have been feeling very safe and comfortable coming to work because we treat everyone the same in the PPE that we're wearing. We've been able to be more in touch with our patients without physically going into the room because we have tablets in each room that we can video in and be able to keep a closer eye on them, especially because the patients on our floor seem to be progressively sicker, and so we can keep a closer eye on them in that way. It's hard to educate the patients because we still don't know a lot about this disease progression, so we have been working on making them feel more comfortable since visitors are not allowed. So I feel like nurses are acting as that role. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. I know you've been doing this with your colleagues, and you've been giving patients remarkable care. The letters we get from patients, you are truly their family in the absence of their family. And I know that you and others have been putting up photographs in the rooms so that people know that they're still being listened to, heard, and are still human beings. So thank you.
And Haley, would you tell everybody on your floor, every one of the nurses there, how grateful we are to each and every one of them?
Of course.
It was very clear to us early on that you had to take on both roles. And it's heartbreaking for me to think of families that, because of the nature of the coronavirus, can't visit a loved one when they're seriously ill. We understand at least we can appreciate the burden that places on you. Other than providing health care services, you're, in a very real sense, you're ministering to people, filling in for their family and their loved ones. And I just want you and every nurse in America to know that we understand that, and people across this country couldn't be more grateful, each and every one of you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. Keep up the great work.
Thank you. Mayo Clinic loves our nurses, and so thank you.
I can tell she's a great nurse. You can tell.
Dr. Maurice.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to visit us. It means a great deal to all of our staff that you're here.
Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, Commissioner Hahn, I want to thank you for your leadership. As you mentioned, I had the opportunity to visit your team up March 4th on the White House to be part of the national solution for testing. Since that time, we provided over 120,000 tests, 30,000 of those for Minnesotans, and we really have tried to serve our communities to the greatest extent possible since the onset of this. I want to thank Governor Walz for his leadership, and as you point out in your documents, it's one thing to have the intent to share what we can do. It's another to have the actual structure to do that. And so under Governor Walz, Commissioner Malcolm's leadership with the University of Minnesota, really being able to serve our communities here in Minnesota has been astounding. So we're very grateful for that. And most importantly, or as importantly, has been our serving of the Mayo Clinic practice and our patients. You know, since the day one, we've been really focused on our patient needs. That helps us, inform us, and the best way to use the test to really manage the pandemic, not just for Rochester and not just for Minnesota or for Arizona and Florida, but really for all the Americans that are trying to confront this. And not only that, understanding not only where testing needs to be today, but where it needs to be tomorrow. So we're very engaged in the innovation, thinking about things like antigen testing, things that will make it possible to test the pre-symptomatic so that we can really understand, trace, and isolate effectively. And it's really a reflection, again, of our ability to learn what our practice needs is really what Minnesotans need and what Americans need. And so having, like many of us, spent my career here, Mayo is founded on teamwork, and it's just a great privilege for me and for all of us to take that teamwork and make it work, not just for Mayo Clinic and not just for Minnesota, but for the nation. So we're very grateful for your leadership.
Well, we're grateful for yours and for the innovation reflected here. How many tests you said you process from around the country?
So around the country, over 120,000 that we have done today.
No, just in general.
Oh, just in general. Last year in 2019, we did 25 million tests here in Rochester.
Right, but just on the coronavirus.
On the coronavirus, 150,000.
150,000.
120 for the nation, 30 for the state.
But the capacity to go forward is in the millions.
Yes, exactly. We continue to scale. We continue to use what we understand about logistics to bring that forward.
Right.
And we also continue on to think about innovative ways so we can do testing as much out in the communities where it needs to be as possible.
Well, you've been a big part of the American solution on testing, and not just for Minnesota, but for the country as a whole. And we're truly grateful. And give your whole team our very best, will you?
I will. Thank you.
Truly grateful.
Thank you. This gets to the end of this round table. We want to make sure you know how much, one, we appreciate all of you being here, but also how deep it is inside our DNA to want to help. We'll help in any way. We'll rise to the occasion, and we can assure you we'll do it with the greatest of scientific integrity, with an eye always on the needs of the patient, and always doing it in a way that offers hope and healing at the same time. So thank you.
Well, Dr. Farrugia, thank you for those eloquent and heartfelt words, and more importantly, for your strong leadership here. It is inspiring to have walked the hallways with your team and inspiring to hear the incredible innovation and profound care reflected in everyone around the table. I know that Dr. Hahn and I will have a great deal to talk about on Air Force Two on our way home, and I'm grateful for his full collaboration with all of you, and FDA's collaboration will continue that on therapeutics and every other measure going forward. Congressman, thank you also for the strong support that's represented in the CARES Act and all of the legislation, including what the President signed. We're providing support directly to American families, to small businesses, but we're also providing support to hospitals. And I appreciate you being a voice, not just for Mayo Clinic, but for healthcare providers around Minnesota, around the country. And Governor Tim Walz, thank you so much. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your partnership. We served together in the House of Representatives when we were both members of Congress. And I know the President is grateful, and I'm grateful for the way from the very beginning you said we're one team, one mission. And I want to commend you for harnessing the strength of the Mayo Clinic, University of Minnesota, and really setting the pace, not just in the Midwest, but around the country in scaling testing. And I want to assure you, as the President reflected yesterday, and as we did on several of our recent conference calls with you and other governors, that we're going to continue to fully partner with you as you lead Minnesotans to that place where we can reopen, we can put this state and all the good people of this great state back to work. And so I pledge that partnership to you. And the last thing I would just say to anyone that's looking on, particularly some of the 39,000 dedicated men and women here at the Mayo Clinic, just thank you for what you do every day. You're healers. And far beyond the coronavirus, long before it arrived and long after we've dealt with it as a nation, the Mayo Clinic will continue to be synonymous with the highest standard of care in America. And on behalf of your President and on behalf of a grateful nation, I want to say to each and every one of the dedicated doctors and nurses and researchers and support team here, just thank you. Thank you for what you're doing every day and to be a part of the healing of this nation. I leave here today with renewed confidence that with leadership of our President, strong partnership, state governments, and the strong partnership with incredible healthcare providers like here at Mayo Clinic and innovators, and with the cooperation of people of this country, that we'll get through this. We'll get through this together. We will protect the most vulnerable. We will put America back to work, and we'll heal our land. So thank you all very much, and God bless you. Keep up the great work.